The microphone crackled to life at the worst possible moment. "I'm marrying the wrong one," David whispered to his best man, thinking no one could hear him, but the entire wedding hall could. 200 guests sat frozen in their seats. The bride, Sarah, stood at the altar in her grandmother's vintage lace dress, her bouquet trembling in her hands. Her face drained of all color as the words echoed through the cathedral's stone walls. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's heart shattered in real time. She could feel every pair of eyes burning into her back, her family, his family, their friends, all witnessing her ultimate humiliation. "David, what did you just say?" she whispered, her voice barely audible even with the microphone picking up everything. He turned crimson, realizing his mistake. "Sarah, I didn't mean." But the damage was already done. His mother, Margaret, smirked from the front row, her victory finally complete. She'd never wanted Sarah as a daughter-in-law, too common, too poor, too beneath their family's status. "Well, well," Margaret murmured to her sister, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Finally, some honesty at this charade. Sarah's maid of honor, Emma, stepped forward. "Sarah, maybe we should."
"No."
Sarah's voice was steel. "I want to hear him explain. Right here. Right now." David's best man, Jake, fidgeted nervously with the rings. The tension was suffocating. Wedding guests pulled out their phones, some already recording what was becoming the most dramatic wedding fail of the year. Sarah's mother covered her face with her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. 3 years of planning, $30,000 in debt, and now this. But then something unexpected happened. The heavy cathedral doors burst open with a thunderous bang. Every head turned as a woman in a flowing red dress strode down the aisle, her heels clicking against the marble floor like gunshots. She was stunning, tall, confident, with piercing green eyes that locked onto David. It was Rebecca, David's ex-fiancée from college. The woman he'd left Sarah for once before, only to come crawling back 6 months later. Margaret's smirk vanished instantly. Jake dropped the wedding rings, and they clattered across the altar floor. David looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Did I miss the good part?" Rebecca called out, her voice carrying through the cathedral without needing a microphone. "Rebecca, what are you doing here?" David stammered, his voice cracking through the sound system. "Oh, sweetheart," Rebecca laughed, stopping halfway down the aisle. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out about your little wedding? Especially after the text you sent me last night?" Sarah's blood turned to ice. "What text?" Rebecca pulled out her phone and read aloud. "I can't stop thinking about you. I'm making the biggest mistake of my life tomorrow. Come to the church if you still feel anything for me." The gasps from the congregation were audible. Sarah's father stood up from his seat, his face red with rage. "You lying piece of," he started, but Sarah held up her hand. "David." Sarah's voice was deadly calm now. "Is this true?" David's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "Sarah, please let me explain." "Explain what?" Sarah's composure finally cracked. "That you invited your ex to our wedding? That you texted her while I was having my bachelorette party? That you've been lying to me for months?" Margaret stood up, trying to salvage the situation. "Now see here, everyone's getting emotional." "Sit down, Margaret," Sarah roared, pointing at her future mother-in-law. "You've wanted this to fail from day one. Well, congratulations. You got your wish." The weight of everyone's stares pressed down on David like a physical force. His mother's expectations, Rebecca's pleading eyes, Sarah's devastation. Everything was colliding at once. "Choose," Sarah said, her voice cutting through his paralysis. "Right now. In front of everyone. Who do you want to marry? Me, or the idea of Rebecca you've been chasing for years?" David looked at Rebecca, then at Sarah. The microphone caught his ragged breathing. He started, then stopped. "Sarah, I do love you, but nothing." Sarah ripped off her engagement ring and threw it at his feet. "That's all I needed to hear." She turned to face the congregation, her voice strong and clear. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming to witness what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Instead, you've all learned a valuable lesson about the man I almost married." David reached for her arm. "Sarah, please don't do this." She yanked away from him. "Don't you dare touch me. You made your choice the moment you sent that text. Sarah walked down the aisle with her head held high, her wedding dress trailing behind her like a queen's robe. Emma and her bridesmaids followed, forming a protective barrier around her. Rebecca looked stunned. This wasn't how she'd imagined her dramatic entrance would go. "Well," she called out to David. "Aren't you coming?" David stood frozen at the altar, finally realizing what he'd lost. "Rebecca, I think I made a terrible mistake." "Yes," Sarah called back without turning around. "You did. But at least now everyone knows exactly who you really are." Margaret tried to approach her son, but he brushed past her, chasing after Sarah. Sarah, wait." But she was already gone, surrounded by her loyal friends who whisked her away in the bridal car they decorated with flowers and ribbons just hours earlier. David collapsed onto the altar steps as the congregation began to file out, murmuring among themselves about the most dramatic wedding they'd ever witnessed. Rebecca stood alone in the aisle, her grand gesture having backfired spectacularly. 6 months later, Sarah received a wedding invitation in the mail. David and Rebecca, finally getting their chance. She smiled as she tossed it in the trash. The woman who'd almost settled for being someone's second choice was now thriving as a successful event planner. Ironically, planning weddings for couples who actually wanted to marry each other. Her phone buzzed with a text from her new boyfriend, Mark. "Can't wait to see you tonight. You're the only one I want to marry someday." Sarah laughed, remembering that devastating day at the altar. The microphone that had exposed David's true feelings had actually been her salvation in disguise. Sometimes the worst moments in our lives are just the universe's way of protecting us from settling for less than we deserve. The greatest gift David ever gave her wasn't a ring. It was showing her exactly who he was before she legally bound herself to him forever. And that truth, painful as it was, had set her free to find real love. After all, why would anyone want to marry someone who wasn't certain they wanted to marry them back?